New World's release is just 2 weeks away, and today I wanted to talk about a new build. Well, it's more of an archetype than a build. What up, internet? Rarity here. Yesterday I brought to you a Battle Mage build revolving around ice elemental damage and how the synergies between the Ice Gauntlet and the Great Axe could lead to some potential AoE fun. But at the end of that video, I reference Paladins and how I was getting some Paladin vibes while playing with using a Warhammer and a life staff. And it kind of came to my realization that a Paladin is more than just the weapon that they choose. So I went through a couple Wikipedia pages looking back at historical Paladins, looking at Paladins through tabletop RPGs and video games to kind of get just the basis of what a Paladin is. And I kind of come to the synopsis that a Paladin is a champion of justice, a destroyer of evil, someone who protects, bolsters, strengthens themselves and allies through divine means. And so, without bringing you an entire build, I'm going to look at this from more of a perspective of archetype. The basis of this is going to be built off of the life staff. And as a paladin, someone who protects, strengthens, bolsters their allies through divine means, I think that starting with buffs is going to be the route to go. We've got our life staff as our secondary because we are a fighter first, warrior first, but we also are one who is going to be the person who protects, strengthens our allies. And these three abilities in life staff, I think, will really be the center of a build that would involve a holy warrior, a paladin, a champion of justice, all of those key terms. These abilities are ones that are going to both heal and buff you and your allies. So we're looking at things like Sacred Ground that causes an AoE heal on the ground. It also will regenerate stamina and mana 100% faster. And it will heal greater when all of your allies are below 50% health. Looking over at the Protector tree, we're looking at Orb of Protection. This is a projectile that can also be targeted against the ground and will give all of your allies Fortify of 10%. Now, you can stack Fortify up to 50% if my knowledge of the patch notes is correct. Additionally, if you put one more point down below, you'll get Recovery for 10 seconds, healing your allies as well. Well, one more point below that, you are also giving that heal and fortification to yourself. And the very last one, this makes it so that when the projectile hits the ground or your enemy, then it will also affect all allies within a 3-meter radius. Great stuff. Additionally, Beacon is a great ability. This is something that you can also target an enemy, but I have seen video where a person targets the ground right in front of them and they still get these buffs. So you're looking at additional heals, 50% larger area, and 5% or 5-second longer lasting ability. Now, there is basically the basis of a build here. As you can see, we have 7 points left of our 19 to spend. I went through and added, if you have a buff, you heal for 10% more, because the idea behind this build is that you're going to be buffing yourself through any of these different abilities, so you're almost always going to have a buff for the strength of your next 2 abilities that you cast when you swap over to your life staff. Now, the reason I don't have any more points spent other than picked up this one just so I could get to Sacred Ground, Absolved, makes so your light and heavy attacks with your life staff no longer take mana. There are several abilities that you can add that may help bolster yourself and your allies or just give you additional abilities, but I think that this will be the basis of what a paladin would be. You are totally free to put points wherever you want, but some of the abilities that I think will be some of the most potent are going to be things like Desperate Speed. When you heal an ally with less than 50% health, cooldowns are reduced by 10%. Not sure if this will be something that is active while you have your other weapon out. And that's sort of the reason why I haven't check marked a couple of these saying, yes, this is something you definitely want. If these are a couple of these are things that do work as a passive while you have your other weapon out, then fantastic. I think they'd be great additions to the basis of a paladin. Additionally, Arcane Justice, when hit in battle, activate a healing aura for you and nearby friends in a 4-meter radius, healing for 10% weapon damage each second for 6 seconds. So total of 60% additional healing, increase that by all the other buffs and things of that nature. Additionally, we've got Sacred Protection. While holding a life staff, increase the base health of all friendlies in your group by 5%. This is something that you're not going to be doing as much, but having that life staff out, just increasing the health of all of your allies is pretty good. Over into the Protector tree, we've got Bend Light. After you dodge, your heals are 20% more effective. I believe this buff goes away when you swap weapons, but if you were willing to start off a fight by rolling in, dropping all of these buffs, they're going to be more effective. Well, you have the life staff out. Additionally, I tried this one out, Defensive Light. When you block a melee attack, gain 5% mana. This doesn't work when you have your other weapon out. Unfortunate. I can see where this would make maining a life staff more effective, maining it more fun, but I think that there was a little bit of potential synergy missed out on having a life staff on your back, blocking with a sword and shield or your Warhammer and getting 5% mana passively. Pretty cool stuff. But additionally, we've got things like Glowing Focus. Buffs you grant last 20% longer. This is a great buff. I would say go ahead and get this, but as these are all pretty long buffs, 20-second, 10-second buffs. I don't think you necessarily need to increase it by 20%, but if you find yourself having troubles getting back around to casting these again, you're spending too much time in combat, then the additional 20% on each of these, so you don't have to swap back to your life staff as often, is pretty good. And lastly, Spirits United. I think that this is a great buff if you are playing with a couple other casters. If you're playing with a lot of melee people, this isn't as great, unless multiple of you are all playing a Paladin-like build, then this could stack and be pretty good. But increase mana regeneration for you and group members by 3%. Now, you have 7 points left to spend. You could spend a lot of them over in this side. A couple of them are more based around attacking with the life staff, but the bottom ability is pretty great. Whenever you heal an ally, if their health is below 50%, heal for 30% more. Great buff. If you feel like spending 6 more points in these bubbles here to get that, more power to you. This last buff over here, Magnify, only works with Light's Embrace. This isn't so much of a buffing ability. It's a great heal, and you have the ability to have a lot of buffs on your allies so that you could heal for more, but I don't really see this being as effective because we're looking really to get more buffs rather than heal because we have more. And additionally, the 2 weapons that I had in mind, the sword and shield and the Warhammer. The Warhammer is a little bit trickier because it's going to be a lot based on how you want to play the build. You have the options of debuffs against your enemies, so that's why I've got things like Clear Out, which also grants you a Fortify for all friendlies within 6 meters when you hit with it. Shockwave, an AoE ground strike that will weaken your enemies, making it so they do 10% less damage and increase the range of that. And then there are a couple other things. I think that a Wrecking Ball build where you flatten all of your enemies could be good for helping assist your teammates, or Path of Destiny because it has a stagger ability if you gain the ability below it. But really, I think it kind of comes down to the playstyle you're interested in. You could go a build where you're empowering after heavy attacks, making it so your heavy attacks have grit so they can't be staggered and canceled, and then also reducing the cooldowns of all of your attacks by 7% when you do heavy attacks. Or you could go more of a light attack build where you reduce the cooldowns by 7% when you hit with light attacks while your enemies have debuffs. There's a little bit more of a stipulation there, but things like exhaustive attacks are going to make it so all of your abilities give your targets exhaust for 5 seconds. You've got the weakening from here. So there's a couple different debuffs that you can give enemies, and you can go more of a light attack build, which also has things like concussive impact, 15% extra damage against people who have debuffs, and resurgence. When you attack with 2 light attacks, you reduce debuffs on yourself by 25%. There are some great builds out there, some great options, but I think sort of the basis of wanting to play a Paladin, granting buffs, giving off debuffs, kind of centralizes around these few points here. This just makes it so you ignore 10% of enemies' armor, And this ability down here, you regain 35% of damage dealt using crowd crusher abilities on this right hand side as health. There are several different good things in here, and I think that this is just kind of the basis of where you could start there. Aftershock's a good ability. You slow all enemies around you by 20% after doing a crowd control effect. Great ability, but I think it is more situational. If you wanted to put more points into Crowd Crusher, you'd have to put quite a few more points over here. Let's say we've got 6, so you'd have to put at least 4 more before you could even get to the Aftershock ability, but that is an option there. And additionally, we've got a sword and shield build. Now, there are 2 different trees here, but the defender tree has a lot more to do with your shield, and it gives a lot more buffs for you and your allies. I only put so many points in here. I put far more points into here than I did with the Warhammer, but that's because if you're going to be playing a defender build, I think you're going to be playing more of a tank kind of play style. You're going to be using abilities like Shield Bash with a taunt gem to enable taunting, and also enable taunting with Final Stand. But I think that in order to do tanking justice, you have to do a lot of damage in order to create more threat. You can't rely solely on these abilities that last 25 seconds of a cooldown before you can use it again, or 45 seconds of a cooldown before you can use it again. That's a long time to wait and allow enemies to run around and start harassing your allies. So this build is sort of more built around ensuring that you're doing enough damage with your abilities to keep focus on yourself. We've got things that are, of course, buffs. So when you block an attack, you gain 10% fortify. Your third attack of your light attack deals 30% more damage and causes threat. We've also got the final attack in your light attack causes 20% slow. And in addition to that, we have 10% more damage dealt to slowed foes. And over in this tree, there's a couple cool abilities that do sort of work in tandem with synergy with the defender tree. We've got you move 33% faster while blocking, and every time you block, you gain a stack of empower. Some pretty good abilities there. And then because we're planning on using a sword and we want to deal as much damage as possible, keep threat on ourselves, we've got precision, which will give you a 10% increased critical strike chance with swords. That is a huge amount of critical strike chance. You cannot ignore 10% crit. That alone is worth putting 2 points over here into this tree. Back over on the other side, we've got recuperation. All incoming heal and regeneration are increased by 10%. So if you've got your own set of healing, I don't think you can ignore increasing your own healing at least by 10%. If we look at the Final Stand, we've got a couple bubbles down below here. If your health is above 50%, you increase the reduction of damage that this ability does by an additional 20%, which just encourages you to spend this Final Stand more often as just a cooldown ability than waiting till you're really low health. Additionally, Restoration, giving you 15% extra health when that ability is done, is just great. Now, I left a lot of key points off of here that is going to be, I think, more impacted by playstyle. So if you want to do things like successful heavy attacks, it grants you empower, and heavy attacks make you lose a debuff. If that's more of your playstyle, fantastic. There are also other things like crits give you haste. When you hit with Shield Bash and Shield Rush, you gain 15% stamina. If you feel like you're a person who likes to dodge a little bit more, you're going to be low on stamina a little more often, and Invigorating Bulwark probably would help you out in that regard. Now, there are a couple other abilities that I think need to be very much based on playstyle or tested more. So, Defensive Formation is a great ability. It reduces damage for all allies within 2 meters by 30%. I believe this also gives it to you. If that's something that you feel like you need, then that's great. But 2 meters is not very large. So if you're playing with a lot of casters, they're not going to be within range to help get this ability. You're going to have to kind of weigh in and see if that is going to be something that's worthwhile to you. Additionally, there are things like additional 15% armor, which is a great buff, and stamina damage is reduced by 15% from melee attacks. These other two, same thing except ranged attacks and elemental resistance. Now, this last ability, one with the shield, I think that this is something that needs to be tested more and really kind of put on the chopping block to see if it's worthwhile. I did a little bit of math. 1% reduced cooldown is, it seems like not very much, but let's say you're going to get hit by 3 attacks per second. That's 3% cooldown per second. And if, let's say, you're taking attacks over the course of 5 seconds, then that's 15 attacks you've blocked, essentially 15% reduction. If you look at an ability like Shield Rush with a 20-second cooldown, you've knocked 3 seconds off of that ability, but it took you 5 seconds to do so. So you could get up to 4 or 5 seconds reduced off of that, but the thing that I'm having trouble wrapping my head around is blocking that many times before running out of stamina. Sturdy Grip would help you with this ability, but I find it hard to believe that you're going to block that many attacks or even get hit that many times for that consistently amount of time in order to justify one with the shield as better than something like defensive formation or just having sturdy grip and sturdy shield at the same time. So it's something that you're gonna have to weigh in and play around with. I think that this is a basis for a good build. It's mostly centralized around dealing more damage and also granting yourself and allies some buffs like improved rush. You gain, all enemies gain weakening, and you can slow all enemies around you. There's a little bit of slow synergy here where you're dealing more damage to enemies with slow. You have multiple different ways to give slow. So really it just depends on how you want to play. I think that is what is amazing that I've discovered about New World is it does a lot revolve around your play style and how you want to play. I think that there are several abilities that are very key, like with the life staff and some of these defender abilities with the sword and shield tree. I think there are a lot of abilities, and the fact that there's so few talent points that you can really play to your play style, and I think that that's fantastic. Looking a little bit over here at attribute points, depending on how you like to play, I think at least 50 points into strength is fantastic for any kind of build that you want to do in terms of a paladin build, because that increases your damage from your light attacks by 5%. If you're doing a lot more heavy attacks, sure, bump that up to 100 points. But I think really the key to a paladin build is putting quite a few points into constitution. You get to increase the potency of your health consumables, increase your max health, reduce crit damage done on you, increase your armor, reduce damage when you're full health, and increase the duration of your stuns and things of that nature. All fantastic ideas, and I think that it pairs well with the focus staff. If you choose instead to not play more of a tank role and you just want to play more of a support role, or you're totally fine with the amount of damage you're dealing working as an effective taunt, then I think you could totally dump some points into focus, change your gem from the taunt gem in your weapon over to amber gem, which increases the amount of damage your weapon does as nature damage, scaling with focus. Now, if you're using a lot of your abilities, if you have the ability to reduce those cooldowns very quickly and you feel like you're running out of mana because you're popping all of your utility quite a bit, the focus tree could be a lot of help for you. It increases your mana regeneration, increases your total mana pool, increases your healing output by 20%. You have to spend quite a bit to get to that 150 mark, but increasing your healing by 20% could totally replace the need for some other sorts of abilities that reduce damage. Or maybe you feel that your ability over here, Final Stand, isn't coming off cooldown fast enough, you're taking too much damage. Well, 20% increased health or healing output to yourself if you're the only one healing could be a great boon. And 30 mana on every self or group kill, I think that that's a little overkill. You probably aren't going to be using your weapon that much, but that last ability is pretty great as well. So that sort of kind of chops up what I think is the basis of a paladin. It really revolves around granting support, strengthening and bolstering yourself and allies, and I think a large portion of that really comes from the life staff itself, not so much centralized around a weapon. I've given you some ideas on what I think are more centralized to what a paladin might be, but yeah, I've had a lot of fun thinking through and theory crafting kind of what a paladin would be in New World. I'm interested in looking into additional builds, maybe like rapier and a musket, because those both scale off of dexterity and intelligence. Could be a cool synergy there. But let me know in the comments down below what you guys think would be a cool weapon synergy, and maybe I'll take a look at it and see what I can do about a build. But until then, I'll see you guys in the next video, and maybe in New World. Peace out.